Minister Narendra Modi just moments ago in his address to the nation. He said 5 critical things, and I'm going to summarize it really quickly because we've got an important set of guests to talk to. He did announce that between the previous packages announced to deal with COVID-19 and what is going to be announced tomorrow onwards, India will effectively spend 20 lakh crore rupees in terms of both economic relief and I also assume stimulus. He said this would be predicated on 5 pillars: economy, infrastructure, system, demography, and demand. He said that the package will cover land, labor, laws, farmers, middle class, entrepreneurs, the entire gamut of stakeholders in the economy. The third and very critical point he said or he made was about a self-reliant India. This entire package is oriented towards creating a self-sufficient or a self-reliant India. So his slogan was, be vocal about local. And then his final point was that there will be a lockdown 4.0, but the new rules are yet to be out and they will be out before May 18th. So those are the critical issues that he has put forth. I'm joined first by my colleague, Ira Dugal, the economy and finance editor at BloombergQuint. Ira, I know the RBI has announced certain relief measures earlier on from the liquidity point of view, and we have the finance minister also announced a very smallish package earlier on. This 20 lakh number is a fairly large number.
Absolutely, Menaka. I think the debate going on since that announcement came is what all has already gone into the 20 lakh. But, no matter which way you divvy it up, even if you add all of the announcements the Reserve Bank of India has made, the LTROs, the targeted LTROs, the cash reserve ratio cut, plus you announce what the finance minister had given out earlier, which was about 1.8 lakh crore. Even if you stretch it all, you still get about 6 odd lakh crore. Even if you stretch everything or add all liquidity measures, that would still mean there's about a 13 lakh crore package that the government is hoping to put out. Could some of that be in the form of loan guarantees, etc., which may not be actual cash outgo? Possibly, but it doesn't matter because if they spend even that 13 lakh crore, I'm taking out the part that has already gone in, that is still a large sum, and that is about 7% of GDP, far larger than what people thought India has the ability to spend. So both in terms of sentiment, which we are seeing play out on the SGX Nifty, which is up, the rupee, which is strengthened, and in terms of the ability to navigate some of what we're going to talk about, certainly this will give them a fair amount of headroom. Details, as you said, Ovi.
Yes, as you have pointed out, the SGX Nifty is up about 4%, and the rupee is a wee bit stronger in the overseas market as well. Let me introduce our eminent panelists today. We're joined by Naushad Forbes, the co-chairman of Forbes Marshall, past president of CII and a well-known business leader, and also with us, DK Joshi, the chief economist of CRISIL. Gentlemen, to both of you, a warm welcome to BloombergQuint. Mr. Forbes, we've been waiting for a very, very long time. Not just for a stimulus package, that's probably later on, but a relief package that takes the pain away from this incredibly long shutdown. Are you encouraged by what you heard the Prime Minister say today?
Well, I'm very encouraged by the quantum of the package. That's very important to have heard. As I think Ira very correctly pointed out, even if you fold in the 1.7 lakh crore that the finance minister announced now, I think around 6 weeks ago, and the RBI, both the RBI announcements, there's still a substantial amount left over. There's still an amount left over that's over 5% of GDP. That's a very healthy amount. It provides indeed, as you mentioned, a lot of headroom for a true support and stimulus package. I hope that what we will hear tomorrow from the finance minister will involve a lot of focus on wage support, because in many ways, what I've been concerned about, and I think many of us in industry have been concerned about, is that it's taken so long to get this package announcement that we were getting worried that too late would be too little. It's because things were unfolding, people were getting unemployed, informal employment, as we saw, has plummeted in the last 7 weeks that the lockdown has been in place, and even formal sector employment is starting now to be under serious stress across enterprises. So what I would really look forward to hearing tomorrow, they say that both God and the devil lies in the detail, and we'll hear the detail, I hope, tomorrow. But what I want to hear really is focus on income transfers to people at the bottom of the pyramid, particularly people who would constitute the migrant workers who have been so badly hit in these as they've lost jobs, livelihoods with nothing in these last weeks, and then something serious for enterprise support for wages. What we've been recommending from CI is 3 months wage support in the form of loan guarantees, because that comes very cheap in terms of the impact it can potentially have. And we've said, look, do 3-month loan guarantees for all enterprises, whether it's a small shop, a large construction company, an MSME firm, a large manufacturing firm, a hospital, it doesn't matter. Do 3 months wage support in the form of loan guarantees where then banks, which at present have parked their money, they have 8.5 trillion rupees, 8.5 lakh crores sitting with the RBI earning a little over 3% interest. And what we've been saying is that, look, that money needs to be lent out to enterprises. It's not being lent out to enterprises because banks are risk averse. They're worried about not getting the money back, and they will not lend it in the absence of guarantees. So that's what I really am looking to hear. I would have loved to have heard it, directly from the Prime Minister in detail tonight. But we've waited so long. We waited well over a month for this package. I'm okay waiting another day.
As they say, Mr. Forbes, der aaye, durust aaye. I'm going to put a quick question to DK Joshi before I pass it on to my colleague Ira. Mr. Joshi, when you heard 20 lakh crores, did you think deficit, rating, oh my gosh, or did you think finally there's some hope that growth may return?
No, I think growth will not return. I mean, let's be very clear. I mean, globally, the packages are up to 20% of GDP also in total terms, but the economies are shrinking by 7%. I think this is only to contain the downside, I think. And so I would view the package as having 2 elements. One is it's like a bridge between the crisis and the recovery phase, so that if the bridge is strong, people and businesses will reach the recovery phase. And then when they reach the recovery phase, they need to be supported during the recovery phase. So I think it seems to have both the elements. I mean, there's some element of stimulus which will be given when the recovery starts, and then there is some element of preserving the productive capacity in the economy. I think, and also there's a added angle of reforms, I mean, which is mentioned somewhere in the speech, that I think that you want to attract investments and so on and so forth. So there is, I think, all those things are packaged together, and we do not know the distribution, how this overall 20 lakh crore, how much of it has been already budgeted or spent. I think this includes monetary and fiscal support both, and what new is coming and where it is going. So I think that that distribution will be critical, and I don't think we'll get the answer in one day. We'll get it over a period of time. It doesn't look like a front-loaded fiscal package. I think it will be spread over the course of the year.
Right. Actually, on that point about some of the other things that the Prime Minister mentioned, Mr. Forbes, what did you make of a fair degree of sort of emphasis on the need to make India more and more self-reliant? He said that the self-reliant India will stand on 5 pillars: the economy, infrastructure, a 21st century technology-driven system, demographics, and of course demand. It almost sounded like we want to do a reset. And like in the past, India seems to do these resets at the time of crisis. So at least they're laying the stage. Whether it actually comes through or not, I don't know.
So, the 2 examples he gave of PPEs and masks, I think were very good examples of actually putting in place the right supply chains and putting those supply chains in place very quickly, very effectively, very efficiently. And it happened thanks to a very entrepreneurial and strong and deep private sector in the country, covering many different industry groups. I always worry, though, talk about self-reliance, because, I mean, I think back to the days of the 70s, when self-reliance was a major part of our economic policy in the country. And it went so far, and it became self-reliance went necessarily together with protectionism. And we ended up walling ourselves off as a country from the best in the world. We somehow took pride in the fact that we had to bounce along roads in, ambassadors that were 30-year-old models. We somehow took pride in the fact that we had inferior goods that we had to live with and pay more for. And I think it would be a terrible thing if we go back to those days of autarky, those days of being inward looking. So self-reliance to address immediate needs, emergency needs of medical supplies, I'm all for it. I think the examples the Prime Minister gave were exactly right on target. Self-reliance as a broad-based economic principle and policy for the country, I'm much more suspicious of. And I would be very much more concerned about seeing any elements of a reversal of our open economy, of a reversal and going back to what I would describe as the bad old days of the 70s.
No, absolutely. And I think it would go contrary to what we've been saying for the last few years. It has pushed the export sector, invite foreign investment to then, sell to the domestic and global markets. Mr. Joshi, some of the other elements that the Prime Minister mentioned, land, labor, agriculture, we have started to see bits and pieces of that happen at the state level. And of course, it's a contentious subject, not to broad brush it. But would you anticipate that over the next few weeks or months, you will hear from the center as well on some of these pending issues to go along with the spend that will obviously be the primary part of the package?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you really want to balance out a big fiscal stimulus package, because what fiscal stimulus will do is it will create a hole in your budget. I mean, so your deficits, etc., will shoot up. But what the reforms do is they don't pay off immediately. Don't think that if they do reforms today and I think the economy will start jumping up, I think it's going to take time. So what the reforms will do is they'll raise the productive capacity so that your growth potential in future will increase. And if the growth potential increases, the fiscal situation will be taken care of. So I think if an upside to growth is created via reforms, I think that will take care of the fiscal stress that the stimulus will create. So I think you need both the elements. So how they are going to be divided, the land and labor, I think, seem to be in the domain of the states now. I think so they'll have to do the heavy lifting there. But the central government, there are others which I think where central government will have to take the leading role. I mean, for instance, even if agriculture is in the state domain, I think they'll have to initiate steps so that this is a golden opportunity to reform the agriculture sector, for instance, and that this sector is the only sector which is expected to do well despite, I think, all the problems. So if I think, and already APMC, etc., are dysfunctional right now. So if you actually create more mechanisms for market making in agriculture, I think this is the right time to do that, and I think that will have a very, very long payoff. The most difficult reform has been agriculture, and I don't think there is a better opportunity to reform agriculture than right now, because I think the between the farm and the folk, all the inefficiencies that exist, I think you can address them right now, because you will these problems will increase in scale and scope right now. I mean, so I think it's the right time to do things which will last you longer.
Menaka?
I think I love how much we're discussing reform, but the question I will put to both panelists is this. We have very poor state capacity, and I mean not just the, state governments, I mean the central government. So every time I hear of this bonanza package that covers 20, 30 different things, I get a little worried, because that means that attention will be diverted over many different small things. And what we need to immediately fix, which is a demand issue that has been now, our problem for the last year and a half, or maybe even 2 years, will not get the attention it deserves. So I'm going to go to Mr. Forbes first on this. Mr. Forbes, too many things we have never been good at. We should pick 1 or 2 things and focus on those, get those right, and then go to the next 2. That's my fear. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree with you more. I agree with you entirely that I think we have very limited state capacity. The economic survey itself, as an official government document, has actually recognized that we have limited state capacity. And as a result, we should focus on 2 or 3 big things, see the effect of those, implement them well, and then move on to something different. And if you ask me, there are three things that we can do to address demand. Two I've already spoken about. The direct income transfers to people at the bottom of the pyramid, something that's relatively easy to do. We should not worry about targeting. We should simply say, Jan Dhan accounts, this criteria, so many rupees every 2 weeks. So that there's nothing further that needs to be done, and then leave it to the individuals concerned to decide how to spend the money, right? Provide nothing in kind, provide it entirely through a direct benefit transfer. It's simple to do, it's easy to do, it isn't demanding of state capacity. Second, loan guarantees, again for enterprises, as we spoke earlier, something that's easy to do, where the government needs to backstop the RBI. The RBI will provide the guarantees to the banks. The banks take care of the actual loans to enterprises. So again, relatively simple to do, right? Yes, there's detail to be worked out here. What are the qualifications for loans? How do you only do this for incremental loans, etc., etc.? But it should be possible to do using a very capable institution in the that we have in the RBI as an intermediary. And then the third piece that I would really address from a demand perspective is that the government owes a huge amount of money. It owes a lot of money to the states. It owes a lot of money to public sector enterprises. It owes a lot of money to large private enterprises. It owes a lot of money to MSMEs. Pay bills, right? So use a large part of this 20 lakh crores to simply pay the government's bills. The estimate that we have is that the union government owes somewhere between 3 and 4 lakh crore between public, private, and MSME enterprises. And if you simply pay your bills, and pay them quickly, right? Again, not something that requires money. But if you're providing the money, it doesn't require any more state capacity. That liquidity going into the system is what will generate demand. So I think trying to generate demand directly, honestly, I think is a bad idea for the government to try and do. I'm not in favor of GST cuts. I'm not popular with some of my fellow industrialists when I say that. I'm not in favor of GST cuts because I think it has a limited effect. It's very costly and has a limited effect in actually stimulating demand. But putting money into the hands of people and paying your bills such that enterprises have money, that I think can stimulate demand. So I would do those three things and that's it.
And I agree with you. I think the more narrowly focused we are, the higher the chances of any success in implementing those, in a meaningful fashion. Mr. Joshi, your prescription for demand return, which should be the focus, we can fix a tremendous number of laws later on. This is not the time to deviate or divert state capacity into figuring that out. And if we do that in a hurry, we will end up with more trouble than solutions. I mean, we know what 2.5 hour long budget speeches end up being. So let's be really honest and candid here with no criticism. What can they do in the immediate short term to fix demand?
Well, I think it's not only a demand issue, first of all. I think it's initially, first of all, a huge supply shock, which gradually morphs into a demand shock. I think it came in as a supply shock because your people can't go to work. Social distancing means that you can't work. So I think you need to address that. So which is partly getting addressed in terms of your lockdowns getting less stringent, or you differentiating, not putting the entire country under the same scope, I would say. So allow whatever can be done. So that is, I think you're managing the supply side from there. I think, but if people are not working, their incomes are suffering. If the companies are not getting the revenues, I think it will become a liquidity issue, will become a solvency issue for them eventually. They can. So I think also that bridge loan, which I think Forbes was talking about, I think that which could be in the form of a guarantee, which like countries like Germany have done, and I think many others are also doing that. I think if that is that kind of support is forthcoming, I think that will be helpful. So I think pushing the demand up will come a little later. I mean, right now, I think it is about ensuring that people survive. I mean, I would look at it more as a survival support right now rather than stimulating the economy. I don't think we have the resources to stimulate the economy right now. I think you have to minimize the disruptions in supply and also ensure that people survive this downturn. And then I think when you reach the end of the of this crisis where the recovery starts, again, I think you will have, because people will have no money, I think the companies will be in very bad shape at that time. At that juncture, you will need to push, really stimulate the economy. I think right now we should worry more about survival than about stimulating.
So, Mr. Forbes?
Yeah, so something that I completely share with the Prime Minister is his confidence in the Indian people. And I actually believe that if you provide earnings and you provide security of employment, so you address those two things through the direct income transfers and you address it through the enterprise support related to wage support, I think demand will follow. And I think it will follow relatively quickly, because I think Indians are consumers of many first-time things. There is a lot of pent-up demand as a result of the lockdown that's waiting to go out there. And I fully agree with Mr. Joshi that in the short run, it's a supply issue. I fully agree with him. I think he's exactly right that in the short run, we have to get our manufacturing engine running again. At present, it's really sputtering and trying to whimper back into life. It's really struggling. And it's going to take a little work. But as we work at it, it will get going. And as it gets going, I think the demand will come back if people are secure about their own earnings in the future. If they are secure about their own earnings, I think they will spend. Their confidence will come back. It won't come back for big ticket items. People are not going to go running out and buy cars. So I think demand for cars, I'm less optimistic about for a long period of time. But demand for small consumer items, I'm very optimistic about. I think people will go out and spend on clothing and on processed foods and on household appliances and a variety of things that will make their life better, provided they have that confidence that their earnings are secure, their employment is secure, and they have something to look forward to. The reform announcements are also very important here, because reforms, as Mr. Joshi said, before reforms turn into improvements in the economy on the ground, is a long time period. It takes months, if not years. But reforms can be, announcements of reforms, especially if they're tangible and long awaited, can actually be a huge boost to self-confidence. Self-confidence for the enterprise sector and self-confidence for consumers as well. So I think, one can put a whole package of things together that can actually indeed show up in a revival in demand sooner. I mean, I'm more optimistic about that revival happening sooner than I think Mr. Joshi is.
I actually just had one last question, and I'll hand it back to you, Menaka. But this one to Mr. Joshi. Sorry, I know I'm going to get some brickbats for this, but is it not imperative for the government to also, sort of give us the other side of the story, even if the incremental spend is 13 lakh crore or 10 lakh crore, depending on the various kinds of math that are coming out? Should we not know what the financing plan is? And I understand in a situation like this, you need to keep all options on the table. I'm not at all saying that any option should be off the table, but that option should be clear, as opposed to us letting us guess for the rest of the year as to where the money is coming from.
Well, I think part of it is going to come from the enhanced borrowing, which I think we have seen. I think that is to plug the hole. I think part of it is going to come from restructuring some expenditure. I think government can transparently announce how they are going to meet this. I mean, but I doubt if the entire stimulus is how it is going to be spent is going to be announced in a day or two. I think it will be several announcements, and I think gradually over a period of time. And similarly, I think you will see the funding part also evolve. I don't think they're going to tell you right away that this is 20 lakh crores and this is where we are going to get resources. Then I think you'll start calculating what the side effects of those measures are. I think it's going to be a gradual process. My sense is monetization, borrowing, and I think some restructuring of spending, some aid we are getting from ADB, from World Bank, from IMF. I think those money will also add up to that. So I think everything will add up to the resources. And borrowing, I think, is an imperative at this juncture. I think, and I think also not only from states but also from we are only talking of center. The states are also there. I mean, they are in a very tight fiscal spot right now. Unlike the global financial crisis, when most of the states had their fiscal deficit around 2% of GDP. Right now, I think they already crossed the threshold. So states are also, I think, in a very, very dire, and the sources of revenue like liquor, petroleum, I think they are all, in a sense, because the economic activities is weak. I think the petroleum demand would not be that much. At the same time, liquor is, I think, we have trouble opening it up, and that's a major source of revenue, about 20 billion for all the states put together in a year. So I think so there's going to be a huge challenge to raise resources at the central level and also at the state level. And I think there are only few options available. I mean, and I think everybody knows that. It's just that we do not know which one you'll depend more on. I mean, at this juncture.
Mr. Joshi, a follow-up question to that then, which is that, do you expect that the fairly large expenditure that we're all discussing right now could result in some adverse rating effect or rating action, and could also have then collateral impacts on both currency, on global flows, etc.?
Well, I'm not. I mean, the ratings are done by my parent company, S&P. So we
I don't mean
authorized.
S&P ratings. I just mean broadly ratings.
No, I think I am not authorized to talk about that part. I think I can talk about the macroeconomy. So that's a no-no for me.
All right, fine. Yeah. I'll let you duck out of that one. I have one last question to Mr. Forbes then, and that is to do with an issue that the Prime Minister did not necessarily dwell into today. Maybe there was no reason, though in my mind, I was hoping that he would address it, and an issue that is critical to the restarting of industry, sir. And that is the issue of migrant labor. I don't think this conversation would be fully complete today if we didn't talk about what has happened over the last 3-4 weeks in terms of how labor was waiting to be able to return home, did not necessarily have enough money or food to sustain while in their various cities that they work in, finally decided to embark on long journeys home. And what we are hearing now, anecdotally and otherwise, from the many interviews that are being conducted on the ground, is that they are in no mood to return to their jobs and the cities that they were working in. And I just want to know, as an industrialist, as someone who represents industry, how are you viewing this situation?
So, I think without question, it's the whole migrant labor issue has been something that we've handled terribly as a country. And it's actually shameful how we've handled it in these weeks. First by prompting with such short notice a lockdown that created this panic. Then without having any infrastructure in place to look after people who were suddenly left with nothing. Then third, trying to stop them from leaving and going home. I mean, you can't treat people in this way. It was quite inhuman. And I think we have to see entry and exit as two sides of the same coin. So if we want migrant labor to come to cities and seek employment there, they have to be free to leave whenever they choose to leave, right? So, I mean, I think that's an absolute principle. Second, I think going forward, we should use the entire coronavirus issue as an opportunity and a prompt to fix our labor laws. And we should fix our labor laws not only in the direction that we're hearing from Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh in these last couple of days. There's been a move to do away with many of the existing laws. And without question, we need to reform our existing labor laws. But our existing labor laws only apply to the less than 20% of employees who have formal labor contracts. Over 80% are in the informal sector, and they have zero protection, and we have complete flexibility there. So we need to have more protection for informal labor, and we need less protection and more flexibility for formal labor. We need to see a convergence between these two. It's going to take a lot of work to come up with the right kind of labor contracts that would really be human, that would provide a base level of protection to every employee, whether formally employed or informally employed, and that would provide employers with adequate flexibility. It's going to take a lot of work to do it, but if we do not do it now, then we've wasted this crisis.
All right. I don't know if you have a last question, but I think so far for the first installment of this package, I'm done with the questions for Mr. Forbes and Mr. Joshi. Are you?
Absolutely. Thanks to both of them for joining us here on this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Thank you, Mr. Forbes, for joining us. Ira, thank you and good night. And I'm sure that we have a long week of lots more reporting to do as we have a barrage of information coming out from the Finance Ministry on various aspects of these packages. So make sure you stay tuned to BloombergQuint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How many places can you be at once? What if we said 9?